So, I recently dealt with something I never thought I'd say out loud. My property got raided by what looked like cops. The reason? An HOA dispute. They showed up in tactical vests with guns and clipboards that looked official. Except, every part of it was fake. The funny thing is, they thought they were setting the trap. Turns out, they walked straight into mine, and when it was over, they vanished. Not ran away, vanished. Vanished. Let me start from the beginning. Before we dive in, drop a like if you've ever had to deal with overreaching authority on your own property. You're not alone. It started with a sign. White plastic, laminated, zip-tied to my fence like it belonged there. Notice of non-compliant occupancy. HOA Zone 5B. I stared at it for a full minute, coffee cooling in my hand, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There was a logo I didn't recognize, a QR code that led nowhere, and small print about regulatory compliance standards for a homeowners association that didn't exist. Not out here. This was Pineback County. Rural land. Working farms and ranches with more livestock than people. The nearest neighbor was a half-mile of dirt road away. The nearest actual neighborhood, the kind with sidewalks and matching mailboxes, was 20 miles out. There was no HOA. There had never been an HOA. I ripped it down, tossed it in the burn barrel, and chalked it up to some idiot's idea of a prank. That was my first mistake, underestimating how far someone would go when they think a clipboard gives them power. Dad, you need to see this. Eliza stood in the doorway of my workshop, tablet in hand, face tight with concern. She'd moved back home 3 months ago after her cybersecurity firm downsized. Temporary, she'd said, just until she found something new. I was grateful for the company, though I'd never admit how much. What am I looking at? I asked, wiping grease from my hands. She turned the screen toward me. Drone footage. Posted an hour ago. The video showed my property from above, every inch of it. The house. The barn. The cleared areas where I kept my equipment. The old fence lines that marked the property boundaries. Someone had digitally marked sections in red, with numbered tags and annotations. Where did you get this? It's public. Posted to a site called Pineback Community Development Initiative. The whole ranch is marked for zone remediation. I felt that familiar coldness settle in my gut, the one I hadn't felt since Kandahar. Pull up everything you can find on this initiative, I said, reaching for my jacket. I'm going to check the perimeter. The motion sensors I'd installed last year were simple but effective. Nothing military grade, just enough to alert me if something larger than a coyote crossed my fence line. 3 had been triggered in the past 24 hours. All on the east boundary, near the access road. Someone had been walking my property line. Someone who didn't want to be seen. I found their tracks easily enough. Boot prints, not hiking shoes. Measured steps, evenly spaced. Whoever they were, they moved with purpose, followed protocol. They weren't lost hikers or curious teenagers. Near the south corner, I found something else. A small metal stake hammered into the ground, topped with an electronic marker. No markings, no brand, but I recognized the type. Short-range transmitter, the kind used for mapping and surveying. Someone was digitally staking claim to my land. I pulled it out of the ground, examined it, then tossed it into my pack. Evidence. By the time I got back to the house, Eliza had filled the kitchen table with printouts and maps. It's strange, Dad, she said, not looking up from her screen. This initiative has a website, social profiles, even a development charter. But there's no actual business registration. The domain was created 3 weeks ago. Shell company? Looks like it. The charter links to something called Horizon Partners Development Group, which links to Regional Restoration Associates, which links to nothing. It's a loop that goes nowhere. Who's behind it? That's the weird part. She turned the screen toward me again. Look familiar? The photograph showed a man in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing a pressed navy suit and a practiced smile. The name underneath read Donald Reese, Director of Residential Harmony. I felt the blood drain from my face. You know him, Eliza said. It wasn't a question. Not by that name. I replied, staring at the face I hadn't seen in 12 years. But yes, I know him. The knock came at precisely 6 p.m. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced. Military precision. Eliza glanced at the security feed on her tablet. It's him. He's not alone. I nodded. Stay inside. Keep recording. Donald Reese stood on my porch in pressed khakis and a light blue button-down, looking for all the world like a real estate agent ready to make a pitch. Behind him, a black SUV idled in my driveway, 2 men visible in the front seats. Jack Harrow, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's been a long time. Not long enough. I replied, keeping the screen door closed between us. What do you want, Richardson? His smile tightened at the use of his real name. It's Reese now. Donald Reese. And I'm here in an official capacity. He held up a folder with the same logo from the fence sign. As director of the Pineback County Development Initiative, I'm obligated to inform you that your property has been rezoned under the new charter. There is no new charter. Oh, but there is. He slipped a document through the gap in the door. Signed last month by the county commission. Your land falls under Zone 5B, which is now subject to our homeowner association covenants. We're here to conduct a preliminary compliance assessment. I didn't take the paper. There's no HOA out here, Richardson. Never has been. Never will be. His smile disappeared completely. Things change, Jack. Communities evolve. Standards need to be upheld. He gestured to the expanse of my land. All this, it's valuable. Too valuable to be left to the whims of individuals with questionable priorities. My land. My priorities. Not anymore. He placed the folder on the porch railing. You have 72 hours to review these materials and prepare for a formal inspection. After that, we move to enforcement protocols. Enforcement? I almost laughed. You and what army? Richardson, Reese, glanced over his shoulder at the SUV, then back at me with a look I recognized all too well. It was the same look he'd given targets in Syria. Cold. Calculating. Certain. We prefer to call them compliance officers, he said quietly. You remember how compliance works, don't you, Jack? You wrote the protocols, after all. My hand tightened on the door frame. Leave, I said. Now. 72 hours, he repeated, turning to go. At the bottom of the steps, he paused. Oh, and Jack, your daughter has grown into a remarkable young woman. That cybersecurity work she does, impressive. Would be a shame if something compromised her professional standing. The threat hung in the air between us. You come near my daughter, I said, voice so low it was almost a whisper. And what I did in Fallujah will seem like a warm-up. He smiled and walked away. What was that about Fallujah? Eliza asked after the SUV disappeared down our drive. And who is he really? I stared at the folder on the railing, feeling the past rushing back like a riptide. His name is Marcus Richardson, former intelligence officer. We worked together during my last deployment. I turned to look at her. And he's right about one thing. I did write the protocols. What protocols? I picked up the folder, brought it inside, and spread its contents across the kitchen table. Maps, ordinances, compliance checklists, enforcement guidelines. Operation Orin, I said, the designation feeling strange on my tongue after so many years. Occupational Rural Integration Network, a post-conflict management system designed to establish control in destabilized regions. I pointed to one of the documents, which outlined a 4-phase approach to community standards enforcement. We developed it for foreign deployment, a way to establish civil authority in areas where traditional governance had collapsed. Create a structure, like an HOA or community council, install reliable personnel, establish rules, then gradually increase compliance pressure until the population accepts the new normal. Eliza stared at the papers. And now they're using it here? What? Land, I said simply. This county sits on one of the largest untapped aquifers in the state. Mineral rights, water rights, development potential. Richardson, or Reese, whatever he's calling himself, he's not here for HOA violations. He's here to push people out. Buy cheap, sell high. Can he do that? Not legally. But that's the genius of the system. It operates in the gray areas. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it's too late. I gathered the papers back into the folder. I should know. I helped build it. Eliza watched me, her expression unreadable. So what do we do? Before I could answer, her tablet chimed with an alert. She glanced down, then looked up, eyes wide. Dad, we've got movement on the east perimeter. Multiple signatures. I moved to the window. In the gathering dusk, I could make out figures moving along the fence line. At least 5 of them, moving in coordinated patterns. They wore dark clothing and what looked like tactical vests. Are those fake HOA cops? I said, reaching for my go bag. Richardson isn't waiting 72 hours. He's making his first move. Shouldn't we call the sheriff? We will. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with. I pulled out an old satellite phone and pressed it into her hands. If anything happens, call this number. It's a direct line to my old unit commander. Tell him Harrow 4 is active. Harrow 4? What does that mean? I checked the motion sensors, which were lighting up across the property grid. It means I need backup. It means I'm calling in a debt. I looked her in the eye. It means Richardson picked the wrong ranch to seize. As if on cue, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. In the quiet that followed, I heard the distinctive click of tactical boots on gravel. Coming closer. They're here, I whispered. Get to the safe room. Lock the door. Don't come out until you hear my voice. Eliza nodded, clutching the satellite phone. Be careful. Always am. I replied, slipping into the shadows as headlamp beams cut through the darkness outside. The fake HOA cops had no idea what they were walking into. They thought they were following a playbook, my playbook. But they'd forgotten something critical. Nobody knows how to dismantle a trap better than the man who built it. Sheriff Tatum's cruiser kicked up dust as it rolled down my drive the next morning. Good man, Tatum. Old-school lawman who understood boundaries, both the legal kind and the property kind. I met him at the porch steps, 2 mugs of coffee ready. He took one without a word, sipped it, then looked out over the land. His expression told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. Heard you had visitors yesterday, he said finally. News travels fast. Small county. He took another sip. This HOA business. It's not just you, Jack. A weight settled in my gut. How many? 7 properties so far. All rural. All valuable. All with owners who aren't the type to sell easily. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive, sliding it across the porch railing to me. Found this on a county server. Wasn't supposed to be there. I picked it up. What am I looking at? Surveillance files. Property assessments. Threat matrices. His eyes met mine. Your name's in there. Marked in red. There it was. Confirmation that this wasn't random harassment. This was targeted. Planned. They're watching the whole ridge. Tatum continued, voice low. Been cataloging for months. Water sources. Access roads. Potential resistance points. He nodded toward the USB. It's all there. Thanks, Tom. He finished his coffee and handed me the mug. Official channels won't help with this, Jack. Whatever this is, it's got reach. I've made calls. Nobody wants to touch it. Understood. As he turned to leave, he paused. Your daughter's still here? Yeah. Want? Keep her close. These people, they don't just target property. I watched his cruiser disappear down the drive, the dust settling in its wake. Then I went inside to find Eliza. Jesus Christ. Eliza whispered, staring at the monitor. The USB contained exactly what Tatum had described, plus more. Property maps, drone footage, personnel profiles, and a detailed dossier on me that included information that wasn't public record. My military service, my deployments, my medical history. But what had Eliza's attention was the file marked Occupants Secondary. It contained a profile on her, employment history, social media archive, movement patterns, psychological assessment. They've been watching us for months, she said, scrolling through the data. There's even a section on my potential leverage points. What the hell does that mean? It means we're dealing with professionals. I pointed to a section labeled Phase Implementation, and they're following a playbook. My playbook. The file outlined a 4-phase approach. Phase 1, infiltration, establish presence, begin information gathering, identify targets. Phase 2, conditioning, deploy visible authority symbols, introduce compliance expectations. Phase 3, pressure, escalate enforcement, isolate resistors, demonstrate consequences. Phase 4, correction, full tactical engagement, asset seizure, occupant relocation. We're already at Phase 3, I noted. They've established their presence, marked the property, made contact, and now they're escalating. Phase 4 is when it gets ugly. Eliza looked at me. What does occupant relocation mean? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Dad, she said slowly, you know how this works. You said you helped write it. So how do we stop it? I closed the laptop. We don't stop it. We reverse it. We use their system against them. Because that's the thing about systems. They're only as good as the people running them. And Richardson had forgotten the most important rule of engagement. Never use a weapon against the man who designed it. I began fortifying the ranch that afternoon. Not with guns or barbed wire, but with something more valuable. Information leverage. Motion triggers went up at strategic points along the property line, not just to alert us to intruders, but to catalog their movements, establish their patterns. IR scatter sensors around the house would give us heat signatures. Comms dampeners would disrupt their radios just enough to create uncertainty without alerting them to our countermeasures. Eliza set up a backup solar generator in the barn, enough to power essential systems if they cut the main lines. She also installed signal jammers and firewall traps in our network, creating a digital perimeter that would flag any attempted breach. Their biggest advantage is coordination, I explained as we worked. They move in teams, follow procedures, maintain communication. Disrupt that, and they become individuals. Individuals make mistakes. By nightfall, we had transformed the ranch into an information gathering system disguised as a simple family property. If they were watching us, we'd be watching right back. What about Sheriff Tatum? Eliza asked as we reviewed the security feeds. Can he help? Tom's a good man, but he's outgunned here. Richardson, or Reese, whatever he's calling himself now, has connections, resources. This operation is too big for local law enforcement, so we're on our own. I nodded. For now, the first real move came 3 days later. No warning, no notice, just silence from the refrigerator and darkness when Eliza flipped the kitchen switch. Power's out, she called. I checked the breaker box. Everything was in order. Not a mechanical issue. They've cut the lines. On cue, my phone buzzed with an alert from the property sensors. Movement at the gate. We moved to the security monitors, now running on backup power. A white utility van had parked at our entrance. 2 men in reflective vests were placing a notice on the gate. Official looking, with county letterhead. Eliza zoomed in on the camera feed. Notice of utility suspension, she read. Property in violation of Ordinance 5.7. Unauthorized usage patterns detected. Service suspended pending compliance review. What does that even mean? It means they're escalating, I replied. Cutting utilities is classic pressure technique. Create discomfort, demonstrate control, force compliance. She looked at me, something hardening in her expression. They picked the wrong house to mess with. I couldn't help but smile. She had her mother's fire. As the van pulled away, another vehicle approached, a black SUV with tinted windows. It stopped short of our security camera's range. A single figure emerged, walked to our gate, and nailed something to the post before retreating. Once they were gone, I went to investigate. It was a laminated notice, more formal than the previous ones. Emblazoned across the top, compliance seminar notice, mandatory attendance. The document detailed a community standards education session scheduled for the following day. Location, the newly established Neighborhood Harmony Center, an address I recognized as an old warehouse just outside town. At the bottom, in bold red letters, attend or risk seizure protocol activation. It was signed by Donald Reese, Director of Residential Harmony. I took the notice back to Eliza. They're gathering everyone in one place. Classic control tactic. Are we going? No, I said, studying the paper. We're going to send a message instead. That night, we activated the decoy system I prepared. Motion sensors at the edge of the property caught movement. A team returning to cut power again, this time targeting our backup generator. They moved with more confidence now, believing we were in the dark, unaware. For figures in tactical gear, communication devices visible, moving in practiced formation toward the barn where our generator hummed. I watched them approach on the thermal feed, then nodded to Eliza. Now, she pressed a button on her laptop. Instantly, the property erupted into chaos. Floodlights blazed from hidden positions, bathing the entire area in harsh white light. Sirens wailed from multiple directions. And from speakers mounted throughout the property, a pre-recorded message blared. Attention, you are trespassing on federal training ground property. Security protocols engaged. Leave immediately. The team scattered, momentarily disoriented. Then the recorded message switched to a new voice, my voice, identifying intruders. Facial recognition engaged. Personnel data uploading. It wasn't true, of course, but they didn't know that. The fear of exposure is often more effective than exposure itself. They ran. No coordination, no protocol, just 4 individuals fleeing from consequences they couldn't afford. When the property was clear, I turned to Eliza, who was smiling at the monitor. That worked better than expected, she said. Temporary solution, I cautioned. They'll be back, with better preparation and actual intent to seize the ranch. So what's next? I pulled out my old satellite phone. We call in reinforcements, because Richardson had made a critical error in his assessment. He thought I was isolated, vulnerable. He thought 12 years of quiet living had dulled my edge and weakened my connections. He was wrong on all counts. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Black River Secure. Authorization Harrow 4, I said. We have a situation. The line went silent for a moment. Then, confirm voice identity. Jack Harrow. Former SEAL teammate. Fallujah, 2010. Operation Shadowpoint. Another pause. Identity confirmed. What's your status? I looked at Eliza, then at the security feeds showing the retreating figures. Under siege. Orin protocols being deployed against civilian targets. Need extraction team on standby. Orin. That program was decommissioned. Tell that to the team that just tried to cut my power. I took a breath. Marcus Richardson is running it. The name landed like a stone in still water. When the voice came back, it was lower, more serious. Coordinates. I gave them. How soon? 24 hours for advanced team. 48 for full support. We may not have 48 hours. Then hold the line. Harrow. You know how. The call ended. I lowered the phone to find Eliza watching me. Who was that? She asked. Old friends, I replied. The kind you hope you never need to call. She nodded, understanding without needing details. Then she turned back to the monitors, which showed the fake HOA enforcers retreating to their vehicles. They'll report back, she said. Plan a new approach. Yes. How long before they try again? I checked the time. Just past midnight. Dawn, probably. They'll want daylight for what comes next. And what comes next? I thought about the phases outlined in the files. About what occupant relocation really meant. About what Richardson was capable of when he believed in his mission. The raid, I said quietly. They're going to try to take the ranch by force. Eliza's expression didn't change. She just nodded once, then began shutting down non-essential systems to conserve generator power. Then we'd better be ready, she said. The daughter of a SEAL, through and through. We had less than 6 hours to prepare for what was coming. But that was 5 more hours than I'd had in Fallujah. And this time, I had home field advantage. Richardson was about to learn why sending fake cops against a real operator was the worst mistake of his career. Chapter 3. The Raid. Midnight. The ranch sat silent under a blanket of stars, the kind of quiet that makes city people nervous. But to me, it was a baseline. Any deviation would stand out like a scream. Eliza monitored the thermal feeds in what we'd started calling the command center. Just the kitchen table covered with laptops and surveillance equipment running off our backup power. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, cycling through different camera angles. Movement in the east field, she said, voice calm. Professional. 5 signatures. Spread formation. I looked over her shoulder at the screen. 5 heat signatures moving with deliberate precision through the darkness. Not random trespassers. Not local law enforcement. This was a tactical team. 2 with rifles, she continued, zooming in on the grainy thermal image. 3 with some kind of wristband interfaces. They're connected to a central system. Richardson's system, I muttered. Those are command and control units. Gives their team leader real-time positioning and status updates. She glanced up at me. How do we disrupt it? We already are. I nodded toward a small device humming in the corner. That's broadcasting signal noise across their frequencies. Won't block them completely, but it'll degrade their comms. Create uncertainty. I remained eerily calm. Not because I wasn't concerned, but because this was familiar territory. Threat assessment. Response planning. Tactical advantage calculation. The part of my brain that had lain dormant for years had awakened, and with it came a strange comfort. They're not just thugs, are they? Eliza asked, still watching the heat signatures approach. No, they're rehearsed. Trained. Richardson wouldn't send amateurs. I moved to the gun safe and entered the combination. Inside wasn't a civilian collection of hunting rifles. It held my old gear. Tactical vest. Comms unit. Night vision equipment. Not government issue anymore, but high-quality civilian equivalents I'd pieced together over the years. Just in case, just for this, I began to gear up. Eliza watched me transform from her quiet rancher father into something else, someone she'd heard about, but never really seen. Time to move to the fallback shelter. I told her, checking the equipment. I can help, she insisted. You are helping. I need you running surveillance and comms. I handed her a secure tablet. This connects to all the systems. You can monitor from the shelter. She took it reluctantly. And what will you be doing? Creating confusion. I smiled slightly. It's what I'm good at. The fallback shelter wasn't anything dramatic, just a reinforced room built into the hillside behind the barn. Concrete walls, solid door, independent ventilation, and enough supplies to last a week. I'd built it when I first bought the place, telling myself it was for tornadoes. But we both knew that wasn't the real reason. Once Eliza was secured inside, I moved into position. The intruders had reached the outer fence line. They were moving slower now, careful, testing for sensors or traps. Smart. But not smart enough. I activated the first countermeasure, flashburst drones. Small, commercially available quadcopters I'd modified with high-intensity strobe lights. They wouldn't harm anyone, but they would disorient, confuse, and, most importantly, reveal. The drones launched silently from their hiding places around the property, rising to 50 feet before their lights activated. Suddenly, the night turned to strobing day. The tactical team froze, exposed, caught in the pulsing glare. I could see them clearly now through my night vision gear, which automatically adjusted to the light bursts. 5 men in tactical vests, not military issue, but professional grade. 2 carried rifles, as Eliza had spotted. The others had sidearms. All wore headsets and wrist-mounted devices. They scattered for cover, but the damage was done. Their formation broken, their advantage of darkness eliminated. Next, I triggered the silent pressure pulse system, another homebrew setup that sent low-frequency sound waves across the property. Nothing harmful, just disorienting enough to disrupt balance and concentration. More importantly, it would interfere with their comms. Through my earpiece, I heard Eliza's voice. They're regrouping at the south fence. Leader is signaling some kind of flanking maneuver. Copy that. I replied, moving through the shadows toward the barn. Status on the road? Clear for now. No backup vehicles detected. Good. They weren't expecting resistance. Richardson had sent a team sized for intimidation, not actual combat. Another mistake. The fake HOA cops breached the fence at the south corner, cutting through with bolt cutters. They moved with renewed purpose now, no longer trying to be stealthy. One pulled out what looked like official documents, code enforcement warrants, printed on fake letterhead. Another had a spray can. They began marking buildings with red paint. X marks on the barn, the workshop, the generator shed. Seizure designations. Property claims. I watched from the shadows as they approached the main house, flashlights sweeping across the porch. They moved with confidence now, believing they had control of the situation. One spoke into his wrist mic. Primary structure located. No visible occupants. Proceeding with notice placement and preliminary securing. From my position near the woodshed, I could see all 5 clearly. The leader, a tall man with a tactical beard and too much confidence, held up a tablet that displayed a digital blueprint of my property. Not public records. Classified data. Military-grade surveillance. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was an operation. Inside the fallback shelter, Eliza watched everything unfold on the tablet screen. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. She'd been trained for crisis situations, different context, different threats, but the same principles. Stay calm. Assess. Act. She opened the secure communication line her father had established and sent a broadcast call to the number he'd given her years ago. The one she'd been told to use only in the most extreme circumstances. Authorization Harrow 4. She said clearly into the mic, "We have a live protocol breach. Coordinates tagged. 5 hostiles. Armed. Using orange system designation markers. Request immediate response." She didn't know if anyone was listening. She didn't know if the code still worked. But she'd done what her father had asked, and now she could only wait. On the screen, she watched as the team approached the main house, weapons at low ready, moving with practiced coordination. They thought they were in control. They had no idea what was coming. As the fake HOA enforcers reached the porch steps, I triggered the defense-grade strobe and disorient system. Unlike the aerial drones, this was a serious piece of equipment, the kind used by special forces for room clearing and crowd control. Multiple lights mounted around the house perimeter activated simultaneously, pulsing at a frequency specifically calculated to disrupt cognition and balance. Combined with the sudden wall of sound, not loud enough to cause damage, but perfectly tuned to create maximum disorientation, the effect was immediate. The team scattered, some dropping to their knees, others stumbling backward. One dropped his rifle, hands covering his ears. Another fell off the porch entirely, landing hard in the dirt. Their comms erupted with confused chatter. "What the hell? Status report. Cannot maintain position." The leader tried to rally them. "Hold formation. It's just lights and noise." But it wasn't just lights and noise. It was planned disruption, targeting specific sensory vulnerabilities. The kind of system I'd helped design to disorient combatants without causing permanent harm. While they struggled to regroup, I moved. Quick. Silent. Positioning myself behind the leader, I reached out and plucked the tablet from his hand before melting back into the shadows. "What the?" He spun around, sidearm raised, seeing nothing but darkness beyond the strobing lights. I was already 10 yards away, examining the tablet. It was locked, but I didn't need to access it. I just needed to deny them their command platform. The team leader was shouting now, trying to restore order. Perimeter secure. Stack on me. We finished the job. That's when headlights appeared on the ridge above the property. 2 pairs, then 4. Black SUVs moving fast down the access road. The fake HOA team froze. This wasn't part of their plan. Backup incoming, one of them called, relief in his voice. The leader checked his wrist display, confusion crossing his face. Negative. No backup scheduled. Repeat. No backup scheduled. The SUVs hit the cattle guard at speed, bouncing over it and roaring down the drive toward the house. No markings. No light bars. Just black vehicles moving with purpose. Abort. The leader said, suddenly uncertain. Abort mission. Fall back to extraction point. Too late. The SUVs skidded to a stop, blocking the team's escape route. Doors opened, and figures emerged, moving with the kind of precision you don't learn in weekend tactical courses. The HOA team's leader raised his rifle, then hesitated as one of the new arrivals called out in a voice that cut through the night. Federal agents. Weapons down. On the ground now. They weren't federal agents. I knew that, but the fake HOA team didn't. In the confusion, I moved closer, watching as Richardson's team made their choice, comply or resist. Training won out over panic. One by one, they lowered their weapons and dropped to their knees, hands raised. The newcomers moved in, securing the team with zip ties and professional efficiency. No unnecessary roughness, no shouted threats, just the quiet competence of people who did this for real. I recognized their leader immediately, Commander Alan Hayes, my former CO. The man who'd pulled me out of more hot zones than I cared to remember. He spotted me in the shadows and gave a slight nod. Message received. Situation controlled. I returned to the fallback shelter, where Eliza was watching everything on the tablet. Your call worked, I told her as I opened the door. She looked up, relief flooding her face. Those men, they're your old unit? Some of them. I sat beside her, suddenly feeling the adrenaline crash. Richardson forgot something important when he decided to target this ranch. What's that? SEALs don't forget their own. I checked the tablet's feed, watching as Hayes' team efficiently processed Richardson's fake enforcers. And I still had one card to play. Dawn broke over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The night's chaos had given way to an orderly cleanup operation. Hayes' team had secured Richardson's men in their vehicles and collected all their equipment as evidence. In the kitchen, Hayes and I sat across from each other, 2 mugs of coffee between us. Eliza leaned against the counter, arms crossed, listening. You want to tell me what the hell is going on, Jack? Hayes asked, his voice the same gravel and steel tone I remembered from briefings in another life. Oren, I said simply. Hayes' expression darkened. That program was shut down. Officially, yes, and Richardson is running it as a private operation now, using the protocols to force people off their land. I slid the tablet across the table, showing him the files we'd recovered. This isn't just happening here. It's systematic. Create fake regulatory bodies, apply escalating pressure, force compliance or relocation. Hayes scrolled through the data, his frown deepening. And these are the same tactics we developed for stabilizing hostile territories. I finished. Except now they're being used against American citizens. Why? Eliza asked. What's so special about this land? Hayes and I exchanged glances. He'd seen the same patterns I had. Water rights, Hayes said. Mineral access. Development potential. This county sits on resources worth billions to the right corporate interests. And it's easier to deal with one development company than dozens of individual landowners. I added. Eliza looked between us. So this isn't just about our ranch. No, I confirmed. We're just part of the test phase. If it works here, they'll expand. Hayes stood. Decision made. I'm taking this up the chain. Official channels. These men, he nodded toward the SUVs where Richardson's team was detained, will be processed and questioned. Richardson has connections, I warned. Government contracts. Corporate backers. So do I. Hayes replied with a grim smile. And mine don't break the law. As Hayes prepared to leave, Eliza asked the question that had been hanging in the air. What about the man in charge? This Donald Reese, or Richardson, or whatever his name is. Hayes looked at me. Any idea where he might be? I thought about what I knew of Richardson. His patterns, his protocols, his contingencies. When an operation goes bad, He'll activate his backup plan, I said. And I think I know what that is. Because the Orin system always had a failsafe, a secure location where all operational data was stored. A complete record of everything they'd done, everyone involved, and every target marked for processing. In Orin terminology, it was called the archive. We find the archive, I told Hayes. We find everything we need to shut this down permanently. Hayes nodded once. Then let's find it. As his team prepared to depart with their prisoners, I stood on the porch watching the sun climb higher. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but I knew better than to think it was over. Richardson wouldn't give up so easily. He'd invested too much in this operation, had too many powerful interests backing him. When he learned his team had been captured, he wouldn't retreat. He'd escalate. Eliza joined me on the porch. It's not over, is it? No, I replied honestly. But now we have backup, and more importantly, we had a target. Find the archive, expose the operation, and the threat. Richardson had made a critical error. He designed a system to identify and neutralize targets based on their vulnerabilities. But he'd forgotten to account for his own. I'd spent 12 years trying to forget the things I'd done, the systems I'd helped build. Now I needed to remember, because the only way to dismantle this trap was to think like the man who'd helped design it. And that man was me. The raid made it to the local news by noon. A small blurb, buried between weather and high school sports. Disturbance at local ranch leads to multiple arrests. Details forthcoming. That was it. No mention of fake HOA enforcers. No mention of armed men in tactical gear trying to seize private property. No mention of the military-grade surveillance equipment they'd been carrying. Sheriff Tatum showed up an hour after the story broke, his cruiser kicking up dust as it rolled down the drive. His expression was grim as he stepped onto the porch where I waited. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Jack," he said without preamble. "They came to my property armed, Tom. What was I supposed to do?" He leaned against the railing, looking out over the land. "I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm saying they're already spinning it." He handed me a printout, an official statement on county letterhead. "They're claiming you attacked HOA agents during a routine dispute mediation." I scanned the document. It was signed by Donald Reese, identified as Community Standards Liaison for the Pineback Development Authority. 5 men with rifles and tactical gear. Some mediation. Thing is, Tatum continued, they've got paperwork, permits, authorizations. Hell, they've even got a judge's signature on a compliance inspection order. He shook his head. It's all fabricated, but it looks real enough to cause problems. They won't stop, I said, folding the paper and handing it back. No, they won't. Tatum straightened. Which is why you need to end this. Fast, working on it. He nodded once, understanding the subtext. We'd known each other long enough that some things didn't need explanation. Those men you called in, he said carefully. The ones who took away Richardson's team. They official enough. Tatum didn't press further. Instead, he said, whatever you're planning, do it soon. Richardson has connections in places I can't protect you from. As his cruiser disappeared down the drive, Eliza joined me on the porch. What now? She asked. Now we find the archive. The shed behind the barn had always been my private space. A place for thinking, for remembering, for keeping things I didn't want to explain. Eliza had respected that boundary over the years, never asking what I kept locked inside. Today, I opened the door and motioned her in. The interior was sparse. Workbench, tool racks, a few chairs. What caught her attention was the black metal crate in the corner. Military grade. Heavy duty. The kind designed to survive anything short of a direct hit. I knelt beside it, entering a combination on the digital lock. What is that? Eliza asked. Insurance. I replied as the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside was an old encrypted laptop, dust-covered but intact. Marked on its lid in faded stencil. Orin Beta. Rural Control Initiative. Eliza's eyes widened. You kept it? All these years. Some things you don't throw away, I said, lifting the laptop. Some things you keep close, because you never know when the past will come looking for you. I powered up the system. The screen flickered to life, displaying a login prompt that hadn't changed in 12 years. Can you get in? Eliza asked. No, I admitted. My credentials were revoked when I left the program. But you can. She looked at me, understanding dawning. Because I work in cybersecurity. Because you're the best damn system breaker I know. I slid the laptop toward her. Richardson would have updated the encryption, but the architecture should be the same. The underlying code hasn't changed. It can't change, or the whole system falls apart. Eliza nodded, already examining the login screen. I'll need time. How much? She plugged in a small device from her pocket, a hacking tool I pretended not to know about. A few hours. Maybe less. Do it, I said, checking my watch. Hayes and his team will be back by nightfall. I want answers before then. 3 hours later, Eliza called me back to the shed. I'm in, she said, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. I looked over her shoulder. The Orin interface hadn't changed. Stark, utilitarian, military efficiency in digital form. But the data was new, fresh, active. My God, Eliza whispered as she navigated through the files. There are dozens of property profiles here, not just in Pineback. 3 counties, 5 states. She opened a map overlay. Red dots marked targeted properties. Blue dots showed acquisitions completed. Black dots indicated properties marked for social extraction. What does social extraction mean? She asked. It means making someone's life so difficult they leave voluntarily, I explained. Pressure, harassment, isolation. Cut them off from community support until they give up and sell. The files confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't about homeowners association rules or property values. This was systematic land acquisition through intimidation and fraud, all hidden behind a wall of fake regulatory bodies and fabricated legal documents. Eliza found my property file, marked with a special designation. Test Case Alpha, Resistance Protocol. They're using us as a test case, she said, scrolling through pages of surveillance data. To see how far they can push before someone pushes back. They got more than they bargained for, I replied. Deeper in the system, we found what we were looking for, the operational framework. Blueprints for Phase 2 land recapture operations. Behavioral surveillance protocols. Tier-based pressure models. Fabricated HOA compliance layers. All of it meticulously documented, legally indefensible, and absolutely damning. Richardson isn't the mastermind, I realized, looking at authorization codes that went higher than his clearance had ever been. He's the implementer. This goes beyond him. Eliza opened another file, a list of property owners who had already sold under pressure, alongside those still marked for extraction. I recognized names. Neighbors. People who'd vanished from community events. Families who'd moved away suddenly, selling land that had been in their families for generations. They're not just targeting you, Eliza said, looking at me. You were the stress test. If they could break you, a former SEAL with operational knowledge of their system, they could break anyone. I nodded slowly, the full picture coming into focus. We need to copy everything. Eliza was already on it, transferring files to a secure drive. What will we do with it? Release it, I said. All of it. Expose the entire operation. Because sometimes the most effective weapon against a covert system isn't force, it's light. Hayes arrived at sunset, his team rolling up in unmarked vehicles. They'd spent the day processing Richardson's men and securing evidence. But the news wasn't good. They're already being processed for release, Hayes told me as we gathered in the kitchen. Richardson has lawyers. Good ones. They're claiming these were just private security contractors performing a civil compliance check. What about the weapons? The tactical gear, explained away as necessary precautions in a rural environment known for resistance to authority. Hayes' disgust was evident. Without more, this gets buried. I placed the secure drive on the table. We have more. Hayes examined the files with growing disbelief. Property seizure plans, surveillance protocols, corporate connections, government enablers. Everything needed to expose not just Richardson, but the entire operation. This is bigger than I thought, he admitted. It's always bigger than you think, I replied. Eliza, who had been monitoring the property's security system, suddenly straightened. We've got movement on the main road. Multiple vehicles. We moved to the monitors. 3 black SUVs approached, moving fast. Behind them, 2 larger vehicles, tactical transports. Richardson's not waiting for legal channels, Hayes observed. He's coming to clean up his mess. I checked the time. They're ahead of schedule. We need more time to distribute the files. Hayes nodded to his team. We'll buy you that time. No, I said. Too risky. Richardson will have legitimate papers this time. Private security licenses. Maybe even temporary law enforcement credentials. Going head-to-head gives him the narrative he wants. Then what's the play? I looked at the secure drive, then at Eliza. We released the archive. Now, all of it. The next hour was controlled chaos. Hayes' team established a defensive perimeter while Eliza worked her magic. The files weren't just copied, they were distributed. Airdropped to local devices. Uploaded to secure servers. time-stamped and authenticated. Video footage from the raid. The false warrants. The command hierarchy. Real names. Real operations. Every property owner targeted by the operation received evidence of the surveillance against them. Every local official who'd been manipulated got proof of the deception. Every media outlet within 3 states received documentation of corporate-backed land seizures operating under the guise of community standards enforcement. Meanwhile, Richardson's convoy had reached our gate. They were organizing, preparing for what they clearly expected to be a complex extraction operation. More men, better equipment, legal cover, but they'd made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were coming to capture evidence. They didn't realize they were walking into its distribution. Files are out, Eliza confirmed, closing her laptop. They can't stop it now. I nodded to Hayes, who reached for the radio. All units, stand down, he ordered. I repeat, stand down. Let them approach. The tension in the room was palpable as we watched Richardson's team break through the gate and move up the drive in tactical formation. They expected resistance. They were prepared for a fight. Instead, they found the front door open and the porch light on. Richardson himself led the team, dressed in the same pressed khakis and button-down I'd seen days earlier. The facade of civility over the reality of force. I stepped onto the porch, alone and unarmed. You're trespassing, Richardson, I called out. Again, he approached the steps, confidence in every movement. That's not my name, Jack. Not anymore. And I'm not trespassing. I have legal authorization to secure this property, pending investigation. He held up an official-looking document, signed by a federal judge. Let me guess, I replied. Judge Arthur Winters? 7th Circuit. Richardson hesitated, just for a moment. How did you? He's on the board of Horizon Partners, I said. The same shell company funding your operation. The same company buying up land after your fake HOA drives people out. You can't prove any of that. Already have. I gestured toward the house. While you were gathering your little army, we were distributing the archive. The change in Richardson's expression was subtle but unmistakable. A tightening around the eyes. A slight paling of the skin. What archive? Orin Beta. The original database. Every operation. Every target. Every corporate connection. I smiled. Every illegal surveillance operation authorized under your credentials. Richardson's team looked to him for direction, uncertainty creeping into their professional demeanor. You're bluffing, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Check your phone, I suggested. He did. So did several of his men. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. The files were out. The evidence was spreading. The system was exposed. You just burned 12 years of work, Richardson said, anger replacing shock. Do you have any idea what you've done? Stopped you from stealing people's land through intimidation and fraud, I replied. From using military-grade psychological operations against American citizens. From perverting a system designed to stabilize war zones into a tool for corporate land grabs. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You forgot something important, Marcus. The system was designed to identify vulnerabilities and exploit them. But you never bothered to secure your own. The sound of vehicles approaching drew our attention. Not more of Richardson's team, police cruisers. Sheriff Tatum's among them. That'll be the real law enforcement, I said. The ones without corporate sponsors. Richardson's team began to back away, suddenly uncertain about the legality of their position. This isn't over, Jack, Richardson warned. Yes, it is. I nodded toward the drive. Your operation is exposed. Your methods are public. Your corporate backers are already distancing themselves from the liability. It's over. As Tatum's cruiser pulled up, Richardson had one final question. Why did you keep it? The original Orin database. All these years, the answer was simple. Because I helped build it, I said. And I always knew someone would try to use it again. I just never thought it would be you. The aftermath unfolded over days, then weeks. Richardson's operation collapsed under the weight of exposure. Federal investigations were opened. Corporate connections severed. Property owners targeted by the fake HOA banded together, sharing stories, filing lawsuits, reclaiming their land and their peace. 1 month after the raid, Eliza and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the fields gold. Will they come back? She asked. Not here, I replied. The system's been exposed. The methodology compromised. They'll have to find new tactics. She nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. There would always be people like Richardson. Always be systems designed to control and coerce. The fight was never truly over. I've been thinking, she said after a while. About staying. I glanced at her. Thought this was temporary. So did I. She looked out over the land. Our land. But I'm good at what I do. And there are people out there who need someone watching their digital perimeters. I smiled. You thinking of starting a business? Maybe. Rural cybersecurity consulting. Help people protect themselves from the next Richardson. She turned to me. What do you think? I think they picked the wrong ranch to mess with, I replied. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about the flyers we'd burned in the steel drum behind the barn. The fake HOA notices. The compliance warnings. All ashes now. They thought it was about fences and property lines. About control and compliance. About forcing one old seal off his land. They didn't understand what they were really fighting for. I fought on foreign soil to protect this country. Now, I'd fought in my own backyard, against enemies using the very weapons I'd helped create. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the lesson. Some battles follow you home. Some weapons can be turned against their makers. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is the one who knows exactly how you think, because he helped write your playbook. Richardson had forgotten the most important rule of tactical engagement. Never use a system against the man who designed it. His fake HOA cops came to seize my ranch. They vanished instead. Not because I was stronger or better armed, but because I knew the trap from the inside out, and I'd been preparing to dismantle it my entire life.